Hey everybody, Dustin Young here, Lone Roamer, and today we're going to talk about the 2021 Specialized Stumpjumper. Now, this bike was a lot of fun to ride. I want to thank Jordan of Specialized. This bike was so much fun to review. It's fast, it's agile, the bike can be tossed around and jumped, and it's just, boy, this bike inspired a lot of confidence. And I took some risks on this bike that quite frankly surprised me to take, considering the length of travel that it had. And that really, I think, goes down to showing that Specialized put a lot of thought into the geometry of this bike and making sure that it was a bike that performed all the time and that it was a great trail bike. Now, to be clear, it's a trail bike. And when you look at it, so something I think Specialized has done an incredible job of in 2021 that wouldn't have always been their strong suit is they're really building bikes with more intent than ever before. Before, they had a rear end design, every bike had it, and that was that, the Horst Link. But they thought about the way a trail bike is ridden, especially today, how far a trail bike is pushed, what it needs to be. And by getting rid of the Horst Link, doing some flex in the seat stays, a DPS rear shock, this bike is starting to show you that they intended it to be efficient. And they put real thought and effort into it being an efficient bike. Specialized would have never developed the brain if their bikes were super efficient pedalers back in the day. They developed the brain because people who wanted to go really fast and climb really hard, their bikes were way too active. And then if you took the brain off, the bike descended better because the brain would make the bike harsh in the rocks and in like the rollers, and it was a little too harsh. So you took the brain off and you put a regular shock on, and then the bike didn't climb as well. So then the next thing you know, people are out trying to put remote lockouts on their bikes. And it was just always sort of where Specialized was compromised in their bike. This bike is not. They did such a great job of making that change. It is a great climber. It is a really efficient bike. The grid casing tires that are on it are really efficient. They roll really well. I wouldn't take these tires to, say, Downeyville, and I might be a little bit skeptical of them on the more technical stuff in Tahoe. But for everything else, I would ride these tires. I'd ride them until the knobs are falling off, and I might even replace them. They were a pretty good tire. They rolled really good. And that says a lot because I'm sort of tire particular, and I like my tires tough. I don't even care if tires are heavy. I just care that they roll really good and I can't flat them. So they did a great job with these tires, and they do their job really well. You know, it's a 140, 130 bike. I got a few things I want to knock down here. The bike travel, I wouldn't probably long shock this bike. I would probably leave it alone. And for a lot of you that might be buying it, you're thinking, well, let's make it a 150, 130 bike and get a little more out of the front end. I don't think this will do this bike any favors because it's a pretty neutral bike and you might start to shift your weight back more than you'd like. The bike already on steep climbs has sort of, as a neutral bike, the typical neutral bike tendency to feel light in the front. You're gonna exaggerate that experience by making the front longer. You're gonna shorten the reach of the bike. This is not a long reach bike. It's not a crowded cockpit, but it's not a long reach bike. So I probably wouldn't do that. I would leave the 140 millimeters alone. If I went to a Fox 36 to get a little more plush ride, I would also want it to be at 140 millimeters. But the Fox 34 in a Grip 2 damper that this bike came with, I don't think I'd change. The 34 is so much stiffer than the old version. I don't think I'd take it off the bike. I think I would keep the weight savings. It's plenty stiff enough. Maybe if you're a real big guy and you want to ride a Stumpjumper, maybe I would deal with that issue then. But if you're under 215 pounds, I don't think I'd touch this thing. And then it would, I'm not, so I wouldn't even know. I'd have to go find somebody to tell me what they think. I would leave that Fox 34 on the front end, and I would probably leave this thing at a 50 mil stem. I will tell you, playing with the front end of the bike, Specialized is really good at engineering. They're an engineering firm. There's a lot of bikes you ride today that wouldn't exist without them. Even if you want to hate Specialized, you shouldn't, because there's a lot of cool technology that's come out because of them. And they continue to do amazing stuff for bike fit, saddles, shoes. They just do a good job with a lot of stuff. And the 50 mil front stem on this bike shines on this bike. It leaves you in a really great neutral position. You can move around on the bike. I had a lot of agility when I was on this bike. I didn't have to worry about what was happening and if I was going to crash, and if I wasn't far enough over the front end, was I going to lose traction, and did I accidentally get too far off the back of the bike? And it rode really nicely in a really neutral way. Now, when you think about that, a neutral bike is going to fit most riders really well because most people ride neutral or they ride back. It's natural to want to ride back. So if you're a rider who's just getting going and you're part of all the riders coming into the sport, and you're part of the big boom of the outdoor recreation industry that's been going on for a couple, 3 years now, and that we saw a huge growth in, post the start of the pandemic, you're going to see that this bike fits you really well, and this is going to be a great bike. Now, I rode this bike in Auburn. I rode this bike in El Dorado County. I did Slide Park. I did a few other trails. I took this bike out to Magnolia. I didn't get a chance to take this bike up too high because, well, it's winter. But everywhere I rode it, it was a spectacular trail bike. It was super efficient in the rollers. You could pedal really fast and efficiently during the flat sections. You could rail the corners really well. That 65.5-degree head tube angle is really good on this bike. I would not run it down in the low setting. It's where the front was 65. The bottom bracket, when I measured it, was only 12 3/4 inches. I wouldn't lower it that 7 millimeters. You're gonna, which is 9/32 or just a little bit more than a quarter. I wouldn't get down into that 12.5-inch bottom bracket. That's a preference. I don't like my pedals that close to the ground because I like to pedal a lot of places and keep my momentum up. And I just wouldn't want to be clipping the pedals I feel like I would be clipping. I think this bike would be spectacular with a 165 millimeter crank, which would eliminate some of that feeling on this bike. This bike, true to Specialized, it's a little bit of flex in the frame. The Expert Edition came with the aluminum Roval wheels. I really think this bike should have came with carbon wheels. I think it would be the upgrade I would make to this bike. The rest of the bike was fine. I'd probably leave it alone and ride it like it is. The carbon wheels and a Specialized bike go well together because that means that you're going to get better tracking because you're going to have a wheel that's not also flexing, because aluminum wheels do like to flex. And you're not going to get the aluminum wheel flex mixed with the frame flex. I did notice that in a couple of sections when I was really cooking and I came into rocks about this tall that there were like hundreds of them for a short section. I started to get pinballed around. Because I hadn't ridden a frame with this much flex in a while and aluminum wheels combined, I'd forgotten that happens in that section of trail. I know it happens in that section of trail because I've ridden enough. My Yeti frame, Yeti has flex built into the frame. It's part of the design. But with the carbon wheels, I can just hammer through the same section. So I think it would be really cool to make that upgrade. It would be probably one of the things that it would have been really cool at the expert level. Even if it was a small cost increase, I think it would have really hit the mark really well with this bike becoming a really amazing performer. Everything else was great on the bike. The guide brakes worked just fine. I would not change the brakes. I wouldn't, all that stuff was really well set up. The SRAM rear end with a 5210 cassette, I think it had 30 teeth on the front. It climbed really well. It felt really good. When you were tired, you could just sit and spin and be really comfortable, and yet you still had plenty of down trail hammer speed. So the overall design of the bike was really nice. I believe the bike was GX and XL1 combined. I should have noted that better, but it was really a very good spec'd bike. Everything worked really well, and you can't, nothing to complain about there. Swat storage is spectacular on the bike. That's a really nice feature. The bike's weight, so I took some good measurements and some weight. And okay, so real quick, how I measure reach. I'll call mine effective reach, because reach is a frame specific number and therefore is subject to what I consider some interesting misses, and a bike tends to then be off. You'll get on a bike that claims it's got monstrous reach and it'll feel crowded, and it doesn't make any sense. Well, it's because the reach is a frame measurement, not a measurement of where your actual reach is. So the way I look at reach, the way I look at effective reach, is the center of the seat rail at the top of the seat. Take a straight edge and set it where your hands sit. That gives you the edge, and measure to that edge, right? So if you measured this, right? So this isn't going to be perfect. I actually know what the reach is on this bike. And this is at your saddle height. This will give you if you'd measure the same way across every bike you demo at your saddle height, you're going to know what real reach is, or effective reach. Maybe not real reach, but effective reach. All my saddles are 27.5 inches, and 50 mil stem with the bars rolled the same way. That way I always get an accurate measurement. I actually have this tracked across a bunch of bikes. I have a big spreadsheet here. It's just data I like to track. This bike had 24 inches of effective reach. That's a pretty good number. It's not real long, but it's not crowded and short. 24 inches is going to be a good number where you have plenty of room to move around on the bike and you don't feel like, the bike is sitting you up. On this bike, I would have, the way it came, I would have slammed the stem a little more. That's rider preference. But I think this bike really gets happy when the stem is down and you use a low rise bar. I don't think this bike really, needs a long rise bar. The wheelbase of the bike, is 47 and 5/16 inches. I think that tells you that the intent of this bike is to be snappy and fast and a point and shoot and, carve up the track, right? It's not long. You're not going to have to fight it in the corners. It's going to turn really well. It's going to lean over really fast. And it's meant to get in and boogie and get out. It's pushing, it's pushing down into XC kind of numbers, not quite, but pushing down into those numbers. Therefore, you're going to get a bike that's a lot more point and shoot and ready to get rowdy. It makes the bike a little quick. I think on this bike, that actually inspires a lot of confidence because you feel like you could sort of snap the bike where you want it, and it responds really well to that. So I think they did a great job of all those numbers. It is a high air pressure, right? Specialized always uses a lot of air pressure. It's sort of part of their kinematics. So there's a lot of air pressure in the rear shock. I did need 240 pounds to be set up for a 190-pound rider. Final thoughts on the bike. This bike is playful. It rolls, it jumps, it's confidence inspiring, it's fast. You can hang it out and you're not going to get punished. If you really want to progress your riding, and most of your riding is like, you've got the normal flow and you've got great sections of trail with, rocks and roots and stuff slung in. And then some sections get rowdy, just like lots of rocks or drops. This bike's going to handle all that really well. If you're looking in Northern California, how this bike is going to ride Auburn, if you want to be really fast on Culvert and Confluence, this bike has got it in spades because it can be pedaled so effectively in the sections when you're not dealing with the technical. And it works. You're not going to be tired, and the bike isn't going to make you feel out of balance, or the bike isn't going to rob you of a lot of energy. So you're going to get these great, long, big rides on this bike and have a really good time. And Specialized did a spectacular job. This bike rides really well, and it is a lot of fun. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I hope you really liked sort of my take on the 2021 Stumpjumper. I see why the bike won some of the awards it won. It's a big change. I had a 2013 S-Works. It's a big change. They've done really intentional things with this bike, and it shows in the riding. It really shows in the riding. So I hope you have a really good time. Go out, rent one of these, or if you're looking to buy one, go out and get yourself a Stumpjumper. You will not be disappointed. This was a pretty spectacular bike. I hope everybody has an awesome rest of their day, and I look forward to seeing you out on the trails.